Please give a very warm Strange Times welcome to the very wonderful Joshua Chris.
Thank you everybody. What a delight it is to be here and telling for such a lovely and, might I say, attractive audience. Now, I have been requested very specifically to tell stories of Chiron. Chiron, the greatest of the Centaurs. And this presents a problem, because of the three great ages of Greek mythology, the age of the Titans, the age of the gods, and the age of heroes, Chiron spans them all and intersects with almost every major story in the Greek mythos. So that's what we're doing today, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle up. Let's see how we go. Chiron felt the arrow pierce his back, and the venom spread through his veins. Like cold fire, like liquid mercury, they stood out black and bulbous on his skin. His four legs skittered, his arms clutched at the wound with useless futility, and he writhed in agony. And his mind, that wonderful, magical, marvellous mind, retreated from the pain that hammered on the doors of his castle, that hammered on the doors of the palace in his mind, and he knew he could not keep the pain out long. He looked around and saw the dead, the piles of dead, the rage in the eyes of Heracles, and the countless dead that surrounded him, and he called out, "Hades! Hades, I summon you! By the bond of love you have for me, you have for Apollo, you have for Artemis, I summon you, Hades! Hades, let me die in pain. Let me die inglorious, and let me die in writhing agony. But Hades, take me, Hades, let me die!" The story starts, I suppose, with Cronus, the last Titan, first of the Titans, greatest of the Titans, the silver god, the Titan of mercilessness. He slew his father by hiding inside his mother, and with a blade made of adamant, a harp, he slew Uranus by slicing off his genitals mid-coitus with Gaia. Cronus was not a guy you wanted to fuck with. And Cronus the Silver, Cronus the Merciless, had a wife. And his wife was Freya. And Freya was as hard-hearted and hard-faced as her husband. She had no heart. Where it should have been, there was only a lust for vengeance. And Cronus, as he was male and a figure in Greek mythology, scanned the landscape, scanned the skyscape, scanned the seascape, and looked for something to bone. And the thing that his eyes rested upon was Philyra. Philyra the Oceanid. And Philyra, she was lovely. She was beautiful, of course, but more than that. She sang with such grace and such passion, it put the sirens to shame. She sang, and the waters bubbled and boiled and frothed around her to be near her. She sang, and the crystal clear waters of the Aegean flocked around her, raised her up in great pillars. She sang, and it sounded the way land, home, appears to sailors who have spent years on foreign strands and tossed about on stormy seas when they first see the beaches of home. That was how it was when Cronus saw Philyra. And he went to her, and he told her that he wanted her, and she looked at him, and she told him she wanted him too. But his wife, Rhea, would have no union between the two of them. And so, the natural creature for him to turn himself into, to conduct an illicit affair with an Oceanid, a creature of water, a creature entirely submerged, a creature of the depths, was a horse, apparently. And so Kronos turned himself into a horse in order to sneak out of Olympus while his wife was asleep and go and make love with the wonderful Philyra. Well, love they made, and of their love a child was born. Philyra felt the life growing within her and knew that as it came from an Oceanid and a Titan, it would be a being of magic, a demigod, immortal, pure, and perfect. Well, the time passed, her stomach stopped swelling, and she gave birth to a tiny creature. And she looked at it, and she was a new mother for the first time. And she looked at the precious bundle of life that was wrapped in her arms, and she said, "Thanks, I hate it." Because it was weird. Kronos had made love to her like a horse, and this baby had too many legs. It had 4 legs, and the body of a horse protruded from the back of an infant. It was strange, it was unearthly, and she cast it out. She threw it to the lands of Thessaly, near Mount Pylea. And she said, "I care not what happens to you. You disgust me, wretched spawn. I will have none to do with you." But the child, being a demigod, being immortal, could not die. And it survived, if what you can call what it went through was surviving. The summer passed, the autumn came, and it rained, and the pitiable creature stumble-staggered and started to step through the slurry and the sludge, its 4 legs skittering, its human eyes welling with tears. And the seasons passed, and the wheel turned, and the wind blew cold around it, and it stepped closer to Mount Pylea, the poor, stumbling foal. And this was a pitiable creature. It was like a combination of an adorable toddler and a tiny baby horse, wrapped into one tiny package with big, sorrowful eyes that had been rejected by its mother and never known its father. And the creature walked. And it walked, and the snow piled up around its 4 legs, and it shivered and looked up at the skies and wept. Well, while this creature wept, the ages were passing. The age of Titans had ended. Zeus had freed his siblings and slain Kronos, the merciless Titan. He had claimed his great adamant blade for himself, and now he ruled atop Mount Olympus. And his brothers and his sisters were the new gods in town, and they set about shaping the world as they saw fit. Well, our poor, freezing, shivering centaur creature looked up and saw the sun. And when I say the sun, I mean the sun with a capital S. I mean the god of the sun. I mean Apollo, who appeared and the snow melted instantly in a 50-foot radius. His radiance warmed the tiny chittering centaur. And Apollo looked down and went, "Whoa, that's cool! That's so cool! I've never seen anything like that before! That's awesome!" And he took pity on the small, whinnying creature, and he named him Chiron. And he taught him. Now, Apollo is the god of the sun, and he is the god of civilization. He is the god of learning. He is the god of medicine and of music, of the city. And his sister saw that he had a new toy to play with. His sister Artemis, goddess of the moon, goddess of the hunt, the wild, the wilderness. She turned and she joined him, and the pair of them raised Chiron as their own. almost a child, almost a weird younger brother. And Chiron, with two such teachers, grew and learned a lot. From Apollo, he learned the arts of healing. He learned the arts of music, of reading and writing and debate and philosophy. And from Artemis, he learned the arts of hunting, how to forage and fend for himself and survive in the wilderness. He learned how to fight. He learned how to shoot a bow finer than any mortal man. And he learned the power of divination, how to read the stars themselves and foretell the future. This was Chiron, first of the Centaurs. This was Chiron the Wise. And Chiron, being immortal, with a love of learning and wisdom passed on to him by his parents. It is impossible now to have read every book ever written. But it's not impossible if you live forever. And Chiron had read every book ever written. He was a wealth of knowledge, of information, and of power. He could do it all. Whatever skill you required, Chiron had picked it up. If you needed someone to read the stars, he could do that. If you needed someone to tell you when to plant, when to harvest, when to gather your troops, and when to prepare for war, Chiron was your guy. You needed someone to come and do your bathroom and redo your plumbing and tile your walls. Chiron could do it all. He was an absolute superhuman.
Not enough apple.
Not enough apple indeed. I'm going to meet you, Judy Pickering. And Chiron was the first of the Centaurs. And he had 3 children. But they were not Centaurs, because he stood apart. Chiron was immortal. And while he may have been the first, he was not the last. I suppose the rest of the story starts with Ixion. Ixion was a king. He was a king in a realm called Thessaly. And Ixion was a bastard. He was a liar and a cheat, a scallywag and a scoundrel, and Zeus rather liked him. And Ixion was in love. Or certainly he was in a form of love which falls upon us when we have great ambition. You see, there was another kingdom, and the daughter who would inherit this kingdom, her name was Dia. And Ixion, oh, he loved Dia. He loved her for her wonderful personality, for her great beauty, for the vast army she would command, and for the lands that she would possess someday. And he went to her father and said, I would marry your daughter. Well, Dia's father said, if you would marry my daughter, you must pay a great dowry. I would like half your kingdom. I will take 3/4 of your kingdom if you would marry my daughter. And Ixion said, but of course I will pay you this dowry. She is worth every penny. My love for her is deep and true. You can trust me. And so he invited Dia's father up to a great wedding feast, but he didn't really fancy paying the dowry. And so he laid a trap. He had his servants dig a great pit and set a fire at the bottom of it. And he tested the fire, first with wood, which burned, then with steel, then with iron, which melted, and finally with stone that cracked. And when he sensed the fire was so hot that anything that fell into the pit would surely perish, he covered it over with a sheet and welcomed up the wedding party. He asked Dia to step out and walk alongside the carriage that her father rode. And the carriage stepped forward, and the 2 horses stepped onto the top, which descended into the blazing pit, dragging the carriage. And just imagine the sight of a fully rigged carriage, with Dia's mother and father looking terrified out the side, their wordless shrieks as they fell into that flaming depth and died. Well, Ixion had killed his father-in-law. And this is a terrible crime in ancient Greece. it was asked that the gods judge him, and the gods judge him harshly. And Zeus said, "Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. How's about we let him off and bring him up here and give him a feast? That sounds fair to me." And so Zeus handed Ixion a presidential pardon, and Ixion got off scot-free. And Ixion heard that he was being absolved of his crimes, and anyone else in his position would drop to their knees and cry out and pray in praise to Zeus, in thanks that he was being forgiven for his heinous and blasphemous acts. But Ixion, as I said, was a bastard, so he did none of that. Instead, he thought, how weak is Zeus? He's willing to forgive me. He's willing to let me get away with that. I guess I'm going to take his woman then. Hera, queen of the gods. I'm going to make her mine. Now Zeus knows all. And Zeus atop high Olympus saw how his hospitality was going to be abused by Ixion. And he thought, that little fucker, I'll teach him a lesson. Right, time to set a trap. And Hera, his wife, said, why don't you just punish him right now? No, this is more fun, Hera. What we're going to do? I'm going to give him some rope and he's going to hang himself. So Zeus reached out into the clouds that surrounded Olympus and he pulled out some cirrostratus and he started to form a creature. He looked at Hera, a little bit bigger, there we go, lovely, head like that, and a body, lump for the body, there we go, and legs, yes, nice long legs, stroke those out, yes, and I need 2 lumps here for the breasts, these are, yes, yeah, these are pretty good, let's make these a bit bigger, yeah, there we go, now we're talking, and he clicked his fingers and the cloud form melted away and stood there was a facsimile of Hera. And she was kind of how mortals might imagine Hera to be, particularly adolescent male mortals, when they were having dreams of a certain type. And she batted her eyelids at Zeus and she bent forwards and she said, hello. And Zeus said, well, hello, aren't you a fetching thing? And Hera twisted him by the ear and he said, I know. Now, you hide, my dear, you hide. Maybe we'll have time for you later, said Zeus to the cloud creature he'd made. Well, Ixion arrived to be banqueted at high Olympus in recognition of the pardon he was receiving. And the banquet went fine, and he gave no thanks. Course after course was laid before him, and he took it as if it was his right to do so. All the while, he was sat at pride of place next to the Queen of the Gods, who apparently couldn't take her eyes off him. Well, after the banquet, he took the Queen of the Gods, Queen Hera, to one side, and he said, I think you're really rather lovely. And she looked at him and she said, hi, I'm Hera, and my husband's not around. Would you like to go to the stables over there? And Ixion didn't say, why are there stables up on Olympus? He said, that sounds great. I deserve this. I don't need to be suspicious of this in any way. I'm just that good. So he took the Queen of the Gods and laid her down in the stables and made love to her. And Zeus watched, which is a bit weird. But when the lovemaking was done, Zeus burst in, dismantled the stables, surrounded them with a ring of gods, and said, aha! You are a bastard, Ixion, and I knew it all along. You tried to seduce my wife. And Ixion said, Hera, help me. And Zeus said, ha, nice try. That's not Hera. That's a lump of cloud I made that looks like Hera, and I let you sleep with. And Ixion, suddenly trying to deal with this influx of information, turned to look at the cloud Hera, who turned and said, and I'm pregnant now. And Zeus and Ixion said, What? And it was true. She was swelling and growing a child within her at a phenomenal rate. Because, cloud people, I guess, do that. There's not very much precedent for this. And she birthed there and then Centaurus, the first of the true Centaurs. But because this was a child of a creature of cloud and a mortal, the race of centaurs are not particularly long-lived. They are not immortal. And because they were a product of such a strange and dubious lovemaking, they are not nice people at all. Centaurs. Imagine that you are walking home and it's 1 a.m. and you hear suddenly turning off into your road, not too far away, a loud group of drunk men. And they are angry, and they are shouting, and they are spoiling for a fight. And you pull your coat a little bit tighter around you and you go, it's only 20 minutes till home, I just won't make eye contact. And one of them says, hey! Hey! And they're talking to you. That is what centaurs are like on their best day. They are boorish, they are loutish, they are drunkards, and they will fight you. And they have this penchant and love for wine, which makes everything so much worse. Well, Zeus looked down at the terrible creation that Ixion had brought into the world. This race of creatures that were going to be spawned by Centaurus. And as punishment for what he had done, he took Ixion and he lashed his arms and his legs to a great golden wheel. The wheel that burns through the sky each day as Helios or Apollo drive their chariot across the heavens. And every day that passed, from then until now, Ixion spins in the sun, burning and screaming as punishment for being such a bastard. There's one more person I need to tell you about before we get to Heracles. And the person I need to tell you about is Prometheus. Prometheus made man. Prometheus was a titan, and he sculpted man from clay. They were his passion project, and he built them like out of Play-Doh, and he used to play with them on the earth and send them out. I love you too. And he wished that man could think and speak and live and learn and love the way that they did for him, but for themselves. He wished that they didn't need divine intervention. And so Prometheus went and stole fire from the heavens. He stole fire, that divine spark, that creative inspiration, and he gave it to mankind. And the fire burned within them and without them. They were warmed, they were clothed, and they could live and look and learn. And for this crime, for this act of sabotage, for creating humanity, Prometheus was punished. Zeus chained him to a rock in the lowest depths of Tartarus. And an eagle, the symbol of Jove, comes daily to land its sharp, pincering talons into him and tear out his liver. It consumes it, bite by bite, and Prometheus is alive and awake and alert throughout the entire thing, magically sustained by the nature of his punishment. And each day, the liver regrows, and the eagle comes once again to tear his flesh anew, spill his blood again, and begin the horrible torture. Well, now the stage is set for us to introduce the greatest hero. And the greatest hero who has ever lived, his name is Heracles. And Heracles is great. Heracles is handsome. Heracles is powerful. Heracles is the son of Zeus. Heracles is the chosen one, fated to complete a prophecy. Heracles has a lovely wife and 3 beautiful children and a lovely house. And I shan't get into the entire Heracles myth because we'll be here all night. But suffice to say that Hera sends a poisonous smoke down to Heracles, and the smoke descends upon him. and he finds a rage coming up through his god-powered muscles, and he picks up a chair and he smashes it, and he picks up a door and he wrenches it off the wall, and he flails and thrusts around him with his sword and club drawn, and he pants and he shakes, and for a moment all he can see is red. The blood pounds in his ears, and when he comes down from this rage, his wife and children lay dead at his feet. Well, Heracles, at this point, has just killed his family. And we've all been there. We know what you do when you killed your family is you go to the Oracle of Apollo. So he goes to the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi and he says, what must I do? And the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi says, you must go and be trained by Chiron. Chiron the hero trainer. Chiron first of the Centaurs. Chiron the wise and learned. And then you must go and submit yourself to King Eurystheus. He will give you 12 labours. You will go and do them, and then you're forgiven. Because that's what it does. 12 labours, and that forgives you for killing your family. So he goes to Chiron. And Chiron is saddened to see Heracles, because Chiron is a prophet. He can read the stars and know the future. A skill he was given him by his mother, the goddess of the moon. And he says, I knew you would come, young Heracles. I will train you. I will teach you as I taught Achilles, as I taught Ajax, as I taught Jason. I will train you in everything you need to be a hero. You shall learn to fight and sing. You shall learn all the arts of civility and civilization and all the arts of brutality and the wild. You will be a warrior poet, Heracles. This is the gift I give you. And when I next see you, the gift you give me will be death. Well, he trains Heracles, and Heracles goes off. And Heracles at this point is strong and wise and brave and very cool. And he has a default programming, because Heracles is strong and wise and brave and very cool. But he's not incredibly bright. Wisdom and intelligence, not very highly correlated. He's got deep insights, but also not very good at maths. And he turns up in every problem that he is thrown at, he has a default approach. Plan A is fill it full of arrows. Well, the first adventure he goes on, the first of his quests, is to slay the Nemean lion. A lion that has been enchanted to make its skin impervious to anything but its own claws. Well, he sees the Nemean lion just outside Nemea, that's where it lived, and it was stalking along the hills. And Heracles looked at it, and its ferocious golden mane, and its huge and powerful haunches, and he said, Plan A! And he drew his bow, and he got his quiver full of arrows, and he knocked an arrow, and he loosed it. And with a blink of an eye, it struck the lion squarely between its eyes and went ping off of its magically enchanted skin. Maybe 2 arrows is the answer. And he drew 2, and he fired them straight at the lion. Ping, ping! But Heracles, as we've said before, not very bright. And he said, well, let's keep going with plan A. And his arms moved as only a god's arms can move. And his bow became like a machine gun. The flurry of fire that he put into this lion was truly daunting. And the lion, a bit concerned by this, was driven back under the sheer hail and volume of arrows. And Heracles followed it with his seemingly endless amount of ammunition, pushing the lion back through sheer firepower towards its cave. Once it was in the cave, Heracles fumigated it, sent great waves of smoke in, and the lion choked and coughed and spluttered, and Heracles came in and wrestled the lion and choked it until it died. Then he took its claws and cut its skin off and put it on and wore it everywhere because, that was just the look he wanted, I suppose, and they weren't selling it in any of the shops. So, the next quest Heracles is given is to go and slay the Lernaean Hydra. Lernaean Hydra, it lives in Lerna and it's a Hydra. It has 3 heads and it's a terrifying creature. And he arrives with a charioteer and he gets there and goes, Plan A! And he tries to fill it full of arrows, but once again the Lernaean Hydra is impervious. And I won't do the whole Lernaean Hydra story because we don't have time, but he kills the Hydra. And he takes his seemingly endless supply of arrows and he dips them in the Hydra's blood. And they are toxic to the touch. And he slings the quiver back over his shoulder, and he heads back to King Eurystheus, and Eurystheus gives him his third labour, which is to go and find the Arimancian Boar. Now, the Arimancian Boar is very hard to find. It's a huge boar that lives in the marshes of Arimanth. Huge! This thing was 20 feet tall. Really hard to find. And Hercules looked for a year and a day. He travelled all through the marshes, and in the end he said, "No, stuff this. Right, I'm going to go get some help. I'm going to go and ask an old friend." And so he goes to Chiron. He goes to Mount Pylea, to Chiron, and he says, "Chiron, will you advise me? How shall I defeat and find the boar of Arimanthia?" And Chiron gives him some advice and says, "Well, you should try and drive it into a snowdrift. Wait for it to snow and all of its camouflage will be gone, and then you must chase it up the mountains and drive it into the snow." And Hercules said, "Nice one, Chiron, nicely done." And he says, "All right, tell you what, you go out and get the fire and get the firewood, and I'll stay here and I'll set off first thing in the morning." And so Chiron the wise, Chiron the learned, Chiron the erudite, Chiron who knew he was to die, left. And Pholus came in, and Pholus was a centaur proper. And he came in and he went, "You right, Hercules, how's it going? You think you're a big man, do you? You look at you with your great big muscles and your lion skin cloak. You think you could take me? I bet you couldn't. I bet you're a pansies. What you? Come on, let's have a fight." And Hercules said, "Well, my friend, how about instead of a fight, I defeat you in another way? I dare say I could out-drink you." And Pholus said, "You think you can out-drink a centaur? Chap, I've got 3 stomachs. You're welcome to give it a try. I've been drinking since Wednesday. You've got an advantage." And he said, "I'll tell you what we'll drink. There's an endless flask of wine. It was given us by Dionysus. He said to be proper careful with it. We're supposed to dilute it. 1 thimbleful of this flask to a whole pint of water." And Hercules said, "I'm not afraid. Come on then, crack it open and let's go." And they went to the back of Chiron's cave, and they broke the seal and tore off the lid of this endless barrel of wine, a wine given to the centaurs by Dionysus to incite them into a bacchanalian rage, a wine given to the centaurs by Dionysus to invoke mischief and merriment, a wine given to the centaurs to last them the rest of their natural lives. Well, they drunk half the barrel in the first hour, and Pholus staggering against the walls, and Heracles stumbling with a little bit of vomit coming out of his mouth. "I'm not done. Come on, let's do it." And the smell of this magically enchanted wine spread through all of Thessaly. It filled the trees, it suffused the grasses, and the meadows were thick with the scent of dianine liquor. And all the centaurs smelled it. All of them. Not 10, not 50, not even a few hundred, thousands of centaurs. All the centaurs that there were in the world. "Lads, this wine, he's opened it. Let's get it. That's our wine. Let's get him." And this huge herd of centaur, thousands strong, came charging up the mountainside towards Heracles. The ground shook. "What's going on?" says Heracles, and he turned and looked outside, and he heard a low murmur on the horizon. And it gathered, and it grew, and the ground shook faster, and he looked and he saw the first wave of centaurs coming charging up towards him. "Let's get weapons, lads!" And they reached and they plucked trees out of the ground, and they hurled them towards him. "You've had our wine! Get him! Come on, let's mess him up!" And Heracles, 3 sheets to the wind, seeing a wave of approaching enemies, went, Plan A! And he drew his mighty bow and his near-limitless supply of ammunition, and he started firing like a Gatling gun into the charging horde of centaurs. And the centaurs started to drop, one after another. Even if they were merely nicked by an arrow, the poison from the Hydra spread through their veins, and in 3 heartbeats they were dead. And the first wave died, and the second wave leapt like mighty racehorses over the top of their fallen comrades, and they met a wall of arrows and died. And the mound of centaurs grew higher and higher and higher and higher, and Hercules was far too drunk to stop. And the centaurs were far too intoxicated to stop. And he killed every last one of them. All the centaurs. And the last one he shot, returning with arms full of firewood, seeing what was happening, coming charging in, saying, "Stop it! Stop it! Heracles, what are you doing?" He turned, and he shot an arrow, and it pierced Chiron right in the chest. As it pierced him in the chest, he dropped and he stumbled. He clutched at the wound, but he could feel the poison spreading through his veins that stuck out black and thick on his chest. And he fell down, and he could feel the pain slamming against him, and he retreated into the walls of his castle, of his mind palace, and he could feel the pain battering down at the doors, and he knew he would not be able to resist it for long. Chiron the learned, Chiron the wise, he thought, and he thought, and he knew that he was immortal, and he could not die. He would not die. But he also knew he had been struck a mortal blow, and he was condemned to stay here, shut up in his mind, forever at the mercy of the terrible pain surging through him, writhing in agony for all eternity. And he shouted, "Hades! Hades, I summon you! By the love you bear your brother and your sister, by the love you bear me, I summon you, Hades! Let me die! Take me and let me die! Let me die in infamy! Let me die an ignoble death! Let me die in agony, but let me die!" And Heracles, sobered instantly by the presence of a dark shadow that appeared, was in the presence of Hades. Hades didn't even look at him. He turned to Chiron with his grey, long face, and he said, "You are immortal, Chiron. I cannot take you." "Then take my immortality," said Chiron. Give it to..." "Who should I give it to? Who is worthy of your immortality, Chiron?" And Chiron, fighting through the pain, fighting through the tears, fighting through the clenching of his jaws, said, "Prometheus. He made man. He gave man wisdom. He gave man life and light and the fire inside his mind. Free him from his torment. Heracles, this I charge you. And let him live when he is done. Hades, this I charge you." And Hades said, "It shall be done." And he took the immortality, that rare and precious gift of godhood, from Chiron. And Chiron died there, writhing, ignoble, and in agony. It would be many years before Heracles could fulfill his promise. Many years and many labours, but the wheel turns, Ixion burns, and the days pass. And Heracles makes his way down into the underworld, into the depths of Tartarus, where he slays the eagle, the symbol of Jove, and frees Prometheus. Prometheus unbound, Prometheus the immortal, Prometheus the giver of life and light to all of us. And Prometheus, with his newfound absolution, turned and went straight to Olympus, knelt before the gods and said, "You must acknowledge Chiron. You must raise him up, that he be an example to all humanity for all time." And the gods agreed. And so they took the corpse of fallen Chiron, and they spilled his body into stars and sprinkled him across the heavens, and he became the great Sagittarius, the learned hunter. And if you look up on a night like tonight, on a cloudless sky, where Nyx the night bird spreads her wings, you can see Chiron teaching us still. And so you know this story is true. Thank you very much, everybody.
Woo! Only just me, because everyone else is muted.